Matthew, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Happy to be here.
Great. Everyone watching probably knows you already. In the case that they don't, will you tell us just a brief bit about your extensive background and why you are such an important person for us to learn from?
Well, you flatter me, Victoria, first of all. Thank you. But hey, everyone. My name is Matthew Stensrud. I'll be in my 11th year teaching this fall. And I've taught for 9 years in public schools in Northern Virginia. And I'm now in my second year at a private Quaker school, a pre-K through fourth grade school. So that's been an exciting adventure to learn about the Quaker philosophy. But it actually has a lot of connections to Orff-Schulwerk. So it's been a really nice fit for me. My expertise is in Orff-Schulwerk. I have my levels training, and I am a movement teacher. And so I teach teacher educator courses primarily in Portland and South Carolina. And I'm not a dancer, though, from background, which is important to say because anyone can dance. So don't think that I'm a movement teacher because I've been dancing all my life. Instead, I played the piano growing up, and that was my instrument in college. I have my bachelor's and my master's in music education. And I also have some expertise in responsive classroom, which is a classroom management approach for elementary students that focuses on really a lot of the ideals of Orff-Schulwerk, which is embedding playfulness into student classrooms and the idea of intrinsic motivation, that we are here as a community together, and that's why we thrive, and that's why we're successful, and that's what's great about being part of a music space together, not necessarily these extrinsic rewards, like you get to take something out of a prize box afterward. Instead, it's like the community we have together and how we build that through routines and common language that lets the student think creatively, but also have some kind of guided expectations on how they feel comfortable and welcomed in the space that ensure that they're successful. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, we don't do music for a pizza party. We do music. We do music with our friends because of the joy we get from doing music with our friends. That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your teaching situation this fall? What are you walking into?
Well, it's a bit unknown. So at this point, there's a couple of different scenarios. One is that it would be virtual, which would probably be a combination of both synchronous and asynchronous experiences for my students, which is similar to what spring looked like, but I think it'll be more specific in a schedule as opposed to a little more freewheeling as the school was trying to figure things out.
Right.
Another scenario is in person. The benefit of my school is that they can have 12 kids to a classroom for one teacher, which is not something that every school can offer. So they're looking at that as well. And if that's the case, then I would be on a cart. And I would be traveling between classrooms, and I would visit kids at their desks with these, glass shields at each desk. And I would have a glass shield up in front of me too. So it would be a pretty intense experience, but I'm kind of preparing for what that might look like as well. And then there's obviously a blended scenario where perhaps there's a couple days in person and then you go back to a couple days virtual, back and forth. So all of those are on the table. And I'm just trying to make sure that I can carefully and easily move between all of them, depending upon what my school decides.
Right. Do you see any common threads between all three of those scenarios? Do you have things that you're like, no matter what, I can fall back on X?
Well, I think the common scenario would be that we're never going to quite have the same community experience that we have in a music classroom where we're holding hands dancing, or where we're all singing together in a space that builds that kind of communal love and support that we get in a music space. So there's going to be a little bit of lacking of that. So instead, I think we're going to fall back on body percussion. That will be something we use a lot of no matter what experience it is. The use of technology, things like virtual xylophones and using other apps can be done both virtually and if the students are in their classroom. And there's a lot of one-to-one technology schools. So if each kid has an iPad, great. You can use that iPad and play virtual xylophones together to kind of create that sound without then having to wash and disinfect the instruments between taking your cart then to another classroom. So I'm kind of thinking it out of the box that way. And not that if I'm on a cart, I need to have instruments ready for those kids. But instead, we can still offer these kind of creative experiences using different kinds of materials. So I'd say another way would be household items or items in kids' backpacks. So if kids are at school, great, we're going to open up our backpacks and make music with what they have in their backpack. If they're at home, then if we have the whole house. So you can build a lesson that you can transfer to either and not have to think, well, I have to totally redo my thinking, because you don't.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting, like the things that you're describing, if you are planning for experiences that utilize body percussion, for example, that's something that students can do in their plastic cases at school. Or it's something that you could have a video of you doing and students do it at home, right? So some of these things, like body percussion or the found percussion ideas that you have, or technology, that is something that you can think through right now. And the benefit is that it will work in kind of any of the scenarios that you are describing, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
and I think that's the goal, to make it, not too overwhelming for us as teachers, that we, if the school says, okay, next week we're moving to this model because of an increase or a decrease in cases, I can say, well, my lessons essentially work either way. I don't have to totally redo my model. So I think that's important for us to, to really feel comfortable and ready for the year.
Right, right. Well, when we think about that from an Orff lens, if we have our found objects and if we have our body percussion and we have speech, that takes care of a huge chunk of the experiences we want students to have in the classroom. So from that very narrow sense, it's like we haven't really lost that much. And I know that's such an understatement. Like I hear myself say it, but in a certain sense, when you look at some media that we want students to engage with, we haven't lost everything. Do you know what I mean? Can you talk as a movement teacher, what are your thoughts about movement this year and what might that look like? Understanding that hopefully as the same way with the body percussion and the technology access, things might be able to drag and drop in a couple different scenarios and rinse and repeat and work throughout the year. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. And I think that once we open our mind to those possibilities, we can actually be really creative and have fun with this idea of, let's say we're virtual and I have this box here. What kind of movements can I make with this box? And I have my hands, and one of my colleagues, Chris Olson, taught me this idea that if maybe you don't have contact improv, where that means your body is improvising fully with another person's body, you have contact improv with your hands, and your hands on screen can do all really exciting movements and motions and connections together that we're then totally opening up this brand new aspect of movement that I've never done with my kids. Is what can you create just in this box? Yeah. Or what can you create if your face goes off of it, but your hands come in, and you can make some really neat things that way, or other body parts, and as well as modifying dances. So a lot of the things I've done over the past few weeks is taking any sort of folk dance and then modifying it, keeping the form, and then having it work as kids are just standing in their place. And I think you'd be surprised how easy that actually is. And the kids still have a blast. You can actually do something like 7 jumps where they're just running in place with the beat for the A section, and then the B section, they're ringing a bell, or they're tension and release, or they're balancing on one foot and then coming down. And you can still get all of the very similar kinds of tools you were hoping to teach in the dance you would normally do, and make it still happen, both virtually and if the students are sitting or at their desk standing up beside it without being able to interact with others. So there's a lot of possibilities, kind of like you said. I think we try to limit ourselves because we think, well, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this. But we can if we just try to think of it in a new light. Right.
Right. Yeah. So 2 things that come to mind. Number 1, like, that's incredible. So now I have 3. First of all, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that framework opens up possibilities instead of closing them off. Do you know what I mean? So that's really helpful. Another thing is that when we think about movement specifically, we have all sorts of things that we can do with movement. The only thing we're taking away is potentially locomotor movement, but we still have weight, and we still have levels, and we still have pathways, and we still have shape, we still have speed, and all of these things. Like, when you look at everything that we still have, we have a lot. We're just not going to take it and move across the room, and we're not going to have contact with other students, but we can still have pathway, you know, and your hand idea is incredible. Yeah, we can still do so much. And then the other thing I was thinking was just about how we want our kids to be creative, but we don't say, okay, I'd like you to compose a piece on the xylophone today. You may not do this, 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 and this. You may not do this. You may not do this. That's not how we frame it, but we do give our students...
I sure hope not.
Right. But we do give our students boundaries, right? We have parameters that we set for their creativity. And this is an example of us as the creators of the creative activities. We have new parameters, but we can still do a lot within that space, just like we would invite our students to make variations within boundaries.
Absolutely. And there could be a lot of really neat things if kids are mirroring each other from across the room through masks and through any sort of plexiglass or whatever that might mean, like what kind of experience is that like? And they're going to notice some interesting differences, but then perhaps rely on things like eye contact a lot more than they normally would. Or they're really going to have to focus on certain things that they may not have always thought about because of what's natural about wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, or being close to someone or not close to someone. So there are some exciting possibilities there,
right,
that will be kind of fun to unpack. So I think you've hit the nail on the head there, that we just need to try to keep ourselves open to what that could look like.
Right. That's so interesting. Let me ask you this. Do you think that video will be a part of your strategy this fall? I know it was a huge part of the spring.
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
What that looks like, I'm not 100% clear. I think of a couple different things. Do I want to make some short videos of myself singing that I could use if I'm in person with my kids, where I'm not able to sing, but then I have a video of myself singing along? That's one thing I'm definitely considering. It would be great for creating pieces like using an a cappella app, or an app where you have multiple images of yourself, keeping a drone in one aspect and an ostinato and singing something, and you have that on loop while the kids are doing some sort of piece. So that's one aspect of a video. I think at some point, no matter what, will be virtual or blended. And that's where these video lessons really come in handy. And how I've suggested my school move forward with using virtual learning, at least in the music room, is kind of this feedback loop that travels from an asynchronous lesson to a synchronous experience where you get feedback through some sort of lesson or activity on Seesaw or Google Classroom or however else, and then the loop continues back again through another video lesson, asynchronous experience where you've used the knowledge on interacting with the kids,
right,
getting their feedback through some sort of experience, and then making a new video lesson that touches on maybe the challenges they had and going forward if they were successful.
Right.
So that's kind of what's going through my mind right now when it comes to that.
Right. Yeah, so I hear you describing two kind of different pathways or two different approaches this might take. One is like a puzzle piece video strategy where you have like these short clips of like maybe 1 to 3 minutes of something that you can kind of drag and drop in a lot of different scenarios. And then the other one seems like perhaps a more, I don't know if I want to say streamlined, Matthew, but it seems a more like perhaps comprehensive. You might be doing a full lesson, and then there is an intentional feedback experience that leads to another full lesson. So instead of like segments that you can mix and match, it's one piece that continues.
Yes, that's exactly right. And they are definitely very different from one another. So we can dive maybe into the second one. I think that probably I can talk a little bit about how I put those together. But yes, the first one really is just that's going to be there to support my teaching if I'm in person with them, or something that I just show to them in a live class on Zoom or something like that. And then it can also be a great clip then that the kids can say at home, oh, I love that song. I want to go back and listen to that song again. So I'll make it available to the kids, and I'll hear from parents that they'll play either clips or full 15-minute videos multiple times, because the kids are like, oh, I loved that class. I want to go back and spend another 10 minutes with Mr. S and do it again, because we're providing that to them in music. And I don't think they're going to get that in a lot of different experiences with other aspects of education, that we can offer this really fun, enriching 10-minute high-paced interactive video where the kids want to watch it like it's, a TV show that they want to watch on repeat or something.
Yeah, because they know the star.
Right? And they feel like they're part of it in
Yeah.
that way. I always talk about how if you think of it through the lens of Mr. Rogers, he would ask questions and invite the kids into the space that let them really feel like they were part of the experience, which not a lot of kind of those video interact experiences necessarily do.
For sure.
And I think that's something that we can definitely do as music educators if we think specifically about how to make that happen.
Yeah. Can you tell me what are the values that you think brought you to this specific mode of video instruction? Because you could be doing just Seesaw or Flipgrid, or like video could take a lot of different forms, but what are the values and what do you want students to get out of this very specific pathway of education?
I really want kids to be making music and active at home.
Yeah.
And if I get together some Google Slides, they might learn something, but it's not going to necessarily be that active experience. So I know when they come to the classroom that we're going to sing some songs, we're going to get up and dance, we're going to play an instrument or have fun with some sort of playful aspect of some sort of concept of music. And then I'm going to ask some questions where the kids would generally explore and create or do things in small groups, etc. So I tried to build something similar in a video lesson in like a tight 10 to 12 minute time frame where I welcome them in and we do some sort of song that's familiar to them. We have a movement break and we have kind of a deeper learning where we might be learning something new or playing with objects found in the house or exploring, different aspects of rhythm, like using building blocks. And then I kind of ask them some questions at the end of the video to spur their thinking. So ideally, they're then, after the video, spending half an hour playing around with some of the ideas that I kind of planted as seeds.
Right.
But then there's also an experience where I try to get feedback from them after that. So visit Seesaw and then and share back your experience with me in a video or by filling out this graphic, etc.
Right.
That then I can get feedback from the kids and see what they've latched onto, see what's working for them, and see maybe, I don't think my video hit the mark there. I want to go back and revisit that again.
Right. Let me ask you this. How do you, number one, that sounds amazing. I love everything about that. It sounds like you've kept the joy and you found a way to live your values as an educator outside the parameters of what you were doing a year ago this time. And I think that's really special.
Right. And you can be just as fun and silly as a teacher through a video. You just have to I build myself up and I set my space down here as you see, and then I just pretend my kids are here. And if I make mistakes, I keep them in the video and I just kind of respond to them like they're here. And I ask a question and I pause for 10 seconds and then I act as if some kids have started responding by saying things to me. And I use that energy to then move forward. And I think if we do that, the kids are going to get that and be really excited to see you, as opposed to, this isn't the same teacher.
Right.
They're not acting the same. They're not using the same language. The kids notice that right away, and then they're not going to feel that same connection to you.
Right. Well, it's because you're describing that the students are going to be able to see themselves in the video. You're very consciously making room for the students. Even though they're not physically in the room with you, they see themselves because you're giving them space to respond and you are speaking to them as if they were in the video, and that makes them feel connected to you more.
Definitely.
I love it. Let me ask you, how do you decide what specific part of your lesson you want to target with the feedback portion? Because you have a lot of things that you're doing inside a typical lesson, right? You don't have a lesson where you say, boys and girls, sit down. Today we're going to learn about quarter notes and eighth notes, and then therefore the follow-up activity will of course be about quarter notes and eighth notes. You're exploring a lot of different musical concepts and musical skills. So how do you focus your responsive portion, knowing that you aren't there to guide that activity?
I wonder, well, first of all, I say I wonder a lot, or what if, but I really will kind of present the final activity in the space together, it kind of maybe naturally bubbles up.
Mm.
So as I'm exploring with household items, if I'm looking for rhythmic building bricks, I'll start to collect them and maybe say what they are,
Okay.
and they'll make different patterns. And then I'll move them around and make a few more patterns, and we would speak them and say, "Ooh, what should we move now?" And move a couple others. And eventually we've explored different 8-beat patterns, and I've said them rhythmically, and maybe I've changed the dynamics a couple times. Maybe I've explored with changing the tempo. Maybe I've explored using, different voices, a speaking voice, singing voice, whisper voice.
Right.
And then I might say, well, what kinds of things can you make at home, and how can you change it? And you're right that it's a kind of open-ended, or very open-ended, but because I've gone through all those examples in a playful way, most of the responses by far are going to be the students doing the exact same thing, because they've been watching you and engaged in that experience with you, that they've set up all of their favorite stuffed animals, or one kid took all of these, lawn chairs from outside and would kind of say different things for each of them, and then would run and move them around. And then, which is really for lawn chairs. I mean,
that's a big deal.
This 8-year-old was like really running around, moving all these chairs and tables around, and planters, and then would go and say them again rhythmically, and then be like, oh, I'm going to use a softer voice now, or I'm going to try to do it faster. And they just started like naturally playing with that because they saw me do it. What's also great about that is to see the varied responses, that I'm not putting together like a specific template that says you have to say, this 8-beat pattern twice, and in first time soft, second time, different voice or something. Instead, I kind of let the kids take it their own way. And some kids was very simple, and they just said their 8-beat pattern once and that was it. But others had the opportunity to take it wherever they wanted to. I think another one that was amazing is one kid laid out probably like 50 objects, and just took their like little iPad and just went the whole way around the room and kept saying them, and would change the way they would say them the whole way throughout. And I was like, this was nothing like what I had ever envisioned.
Right.
But how amazing is that?
Yeah.
And our kids then are investing so much time and playful energy into that activity, that they're not, sitting watching Netflix or other things, because we want them to take that 10-minute video and make it, a 45-minute musical experience, hopefully.
Right. That lasts the rest of their lives, right? Like this is a creative prompt that they will continue to go back to time and time again. I love that. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. And again, this goes back to what you were saying earlier about we're removing the parameters and we're changing the parameters. But you, Matthew, are still the same creative and musical and student-centered teacher. You are just expressing it in a different way. But you as a person and your values and the end student experience in so many ways is exactly the same. So a lot of things are changing.
And we don't want to lose sight of that. It can be easy to, and to be a little downtrodden by the environment that we're in right now, to say, well, I can't do any of the things that I love to do.
Right.
And that can be hard to kind of overcome and remind ourselves, okay, we can. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging sometimes, but our students are going to get so much out of it. And it also keeps me a little more uplifted than I think I would be otherwise, because I can still use some sort of creative energy that I would use in the classroom all the time, that is still within me, and letting that continue to happen.
Well, let's talk about a little bit of those pain points. You mentioned the word hard. It sounds like there's like some mental roadblocks that you've been working through, and you have a lot of experience from doing video this past spring. So can you talk about some of the roadblocks that teachers might encounter if they say, I want to do what Matthew does? What are some of the challenges that people might run into?
There may be some. I've definitely faced them. I've definitely faced them. The technology aspect is something to get used to.
Yeah.
So I highly suggest you just create what is your best step-by-step process for you, and do that every time. A few tips from me would be, I always use my phone to record. I have a tripod. I put it in the exact same place. I keep my lighting the same. I do my lessons down here. Occasionally I might move, but it's so much easier from that standpoint that I can focus on the creative energy and not on the lighting and all these other things if I just continue to use the same space. Always put your phone in airplane mode so no one calls you when you're making a video.
You had a bad experience with that.
I had a bad experience with that, but that's a whole nother story. And I take the video and never stop. So I then, if I feel like I need to edit out something at some point, I can do it later, but I just do it all in one take. And then I move that to my computer, and I have a template in iMovie that I just slide it right into. And if I need to edit it in a few spots, I do, but sometimes I don't. I can put it right in and clip off the beginning and the end and keep the middle, even if it's not 100% perfect, because our classroom teaching experience wouldn't be perfect. It's okay for our kids to see something that's not pristine because, life isn't pristine right now. And then I'm done. And I remind myself I'm not going to worry about it. It doesn't have to be this picture perfect experience. So if you have that kind of step-by-step process, that can be really helpful. But it took me some time to figure out what was best. And the uploading experiences can be, you might have to wait a while. You have to leave your computer be and go do other things. So that can be a little hard too. I think another pain point would just be sometimes I feel a little less creative. It can be hard for me to harness that energy to bring it to my classroom with my kids when I'm doing things virtually. So one suggestion that's really worked well for me is having a community of educators that I can continue to glean ideas from. So whether it's, on social media like Instagram or Facebook, or whether it's just FaceTiming some of your favorite, music buddies from college or from a local Orff chapter or from a levels course or something, because sometimes I'll feel like, I'm not really sure what I want to do this week. And I'll have a conversation with a friend and we just kind of start talking about ideas. And then all of a sudden I'm like, yes, this is the most amazing thing ever. That kind of like lit a light bulb in my mind. Right. So that was something that I had to be okay with doing. And you should also be okay with saying, I want to reach out and have some conversations with my colleagues to kind of get the spark back if you've lost it. And I don't think that means like just posting on Facebook, hey, I need ideas. I'm not sure that that's the route I would take, because you're not always going to get back the best responses. And I think a lot of what we get back in this world is because we give something. So if you're giving things by reaching out to a friend of yours and starting that conversation, that energy that you have with them, whether on Zoom or elsewhere, I think is a lot more powerful for kind of getting those experiences that you're going to be really excited about. And I've seen some teachers where I held a work session last week where I had like 25 teachers come, and they split into groups of 5 and started talking through ideas. And the lessons they shared were amazing at the end. And I think what they all realized was, I couldn't quite come up with all of these ideas on my own, but because I could harness that energy through this collective experience of talking through things, all of a sudden these ideas came to light. So that's something I really hope that teachers continue to do, even if they're at home.
Right. Yeah, you think about any sort of new challenge in life, whatever it is, like challenges with, losing a job or relationships or just like going through life. The worst thing you can do when you're facing a big obstacle that's weighing on your heart is to decide that you have to do it alone. To decide that you have to come up with the solution single-handedly. And there's no way. There's no way, especially this fall, when the only thing we know for sure walking into this school year is that we will not be able to anticipate everything coming up, and there's no way that we can stay in a healthy headspace and be isolated from our communities,
Yeah, definitely. So I really hope that every teacher does that. And I'm sure that every teacher that watches this should also know that Victoria and I can always be those people.
Yes. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I know you and I get energy from those things, talking to people and
very
learning
much
from people, for sure. That's great. Let me ask you this, Matthew. What could support look like for you this year? You are walking into a lot of change and you are walking into a lot of unknowns. What might support look like for your process?
One thing that helps me is routines. Whether I am teaching virtually or going into the school building for a while at some point, I think coming up with a routine that allows me to focus on our time with the kids and not on outside things helps me be successful for sure. So that's essential for me to feel supported in myself. So that's one thing I always kind of remind myself of each and every day, whether it's like I make the same protein shake right when I wake up, or I listen to like some music in the car that like I want to listen to these couple songs or whatever. Sometimes those routines can be really helpful, kind of inspiring yourself. Another support for me is an outlet to do something outside of just teaching. So I love to dance. So lately I've been putting on 90s music and just dancing in my basement.
Nice.
Who doesn't love good 90s music, really?
Right.
But that needs to support like my inner soul in a little bit of a different way, right? That I'm getting something out of that that's helping me help stay sane, perhaps, or still feel connected to this world in that kind of way with our bodies. Is that exactly what you were getting at when you asked that question?
That's perfect. That's perfect. That's wonderful. Right. You're saying that if your world is very unstable, you recognize that there are things you can do to add stability in your life, in your circle of your day. And so you know that there are things that aren't changing so that you have the mental energy to take on whatever changes you know are coming, so you make stable systems so that you feel good about the instability that you're going to handle later, and I think something important that you talked about is that your stable systems happen at home.
Yeah, like if school's the unknown, right? If school's the unknown, we don't know what each day is going to bring. Then outside of school, I'm going to follow the same routines. I'm going to go on if I go on a walk every evening, I'm going to keep that up, even if I feel like I'm exhausted and I just want to sit down. For me, it's cardio workouts and high intensity training kinds of workouts that I do, that some days I feel like I really don't want to do it. But then once you do, you say, gosh, that's what I needed, because that was that stability and something you're used to. So I'm definitely thinking ahead to, there's going to be days that I'm going into the school where I'm going to feel drained and I'm not going to want to do those things that bring routine to my life, but I need to, and I should, and I think everyone should.
To wrap a bow on this, my big question that I'm asking in all of these interviews is essentially, what's working? What's going to work? And it sounds like what I've heard from you is that what is going to work this fall, no matter what, is staying creative and staying in community and focusing on student experiences. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. And maybe I would offer one final other thing, which is using books. I've been so excited about using so many books this summer, and teachers are asking. And my one tip is like, just buy the book on Kindle, and then you can screenshot it and it can be available on the screen in any classroom that you're in or virtually. And I've been using those as springboards into lessons, and you'd be surprised how many gems of ideas you can get from a story.
Right.
So if you're ever like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you ever feel like you're down in a rut about what kind of lessons you want to do, pick up an amazing book, whether you have already a book in your classroom or you want to find these new books that teachers are posting about in different places online. You can use that story that not only is windows and doors and mirrors for our kids, which is a whole nother conversation, but then can be a springboard into these beautiful, playful lessons that start just appearing in books. So that's something else that I feel like I had to mention.
Absolutely. To close us out, Matthew, you talk about all of your brilliant ideas in a lot of different places, but one specific place that people can support you is your Patreon account, right? Can you share a little bit about how people can find you and support you with that pathway?
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that. some people might know me through Instagram or Facebook, or I do different Orff workshops across the country. But I also have a Patreon page, which is a great community of learners. And I mentioned it about the work session that I did with teachers. So it's essentially a place where teachers can gather for video lessons, written lesson plans, webinars, courses, other workshops, for teachers to connect with me and with one another, so we can kind of go through this experience together. And there's a number of different tiers. Like, you can sign up for as little as $3, and then you just get access to lessons and video experiences. You can sign up for a different amount of money, and you can I'll join you for one-on-one calls. There's different classes you can take with me that we'll do on Zoom or on Schoology or on other different kinds of portals. That I think what's been great about it is right now there's, a couple hundred teachers that we might gather on Zoom, and then we get to see each other again and talk about how things are going and create lessons together and kind of take this journey together, which, like you said, you never want to do this alone. So that's what I've really enjoyed doing that and providing that for teachers across the country and across the globe. Right. I have some teachers as far as Turkey and elsewhere that have joined. And I also think it's a great chance to give back. So I want to mention that I donate 20% of any support that I receive back to the community, whether it's, organizations that support Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ organizations or other groups that are supporting our students and our youth. And I'm excited to be able to offer that because of this page. So I think that is also really important to me to mention. And it's great to be part of a group of teachers that, want to offer that out to the world.
Awesome. That's great. Matthew, thank you so much for your time. I hope that everybody listening and watching feels refreshed and feels encouraged, because I absolutely do, thinking about all of the opportunities that we have available to us and the strong support system that we have in this community and through people like you. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, Victoria. It was great to chat with you.